John, you know why I'm here today? To speak with you about
Sure.
your experiences 23 years ago today. So before we get to that specific date, tell me a little bit about your background and how and why you were in New York on that day.
Sure, I'm a retired NYPD police officer. I was assigned to the Harbor Patrol. That morning, I was assigned to the Launch 4, which is one of our larger boats, with two of my other colleagues, workers, and we were in the North Cove Marina, which is about 1 block away from the World Trade Center. That morning, we wound up going back into our base, which is in Brooklyn, to pick up some military guys to give them a tour of New York Harbor. We no sooner got into our base and we get a call that a plane hit one of the towers in the World Trade Center. So we turned the boat around, we started getting into Manhattan, and as soon as we got about a mile outside of Battery Park, we look up and we see another plane number 2 go into tower number 2. At that point, we assumed at that point that it was not an accident. Soon after that, we get a call from the mayor's office. At the time, was Mayor Giuliani. We go pick him up up the East River, and so as soon as he's about to get on the boat, they tell him, Mayor, you can't get on the boat. You can't go downtown. Tower 2 is about to collapse.
So you were going to pick the mayor up,
Yes, correct, and bring him downtown to the site.
and they told him that he can't go downtown because what?
Because the Tower 2 is about to collapse.
And they just wanted him to be safe.
Yes, they just wanted to make sure that he was not in harm's way. At that point, we turn the boat around and we start heading back down towards the south part of Manhattan. We get to about the Brooklyn Bridge and we see that Tower 2 collapsed. We make our way around back to the marina where we were originally. At that point, we saw that there were people still in Tower 1. Unfortunately, we saw people actually jumping for their lives at that point. And soon after that is when that Tower 1 came down.
Thank you for sharing that. First call you got about, hey, something happened, and you turned it to go back to Manhattan,
Right.
and see. What were your thoughts before you heard about the second tower? What were your first thoughts hearing about it?
We figured that it might have been a Cessna plane, a small plane that went into the tower from the distance where we were, and the towers being so big and high up in the sky, it looked like a small, cut into the tower. We started getting closer, and of course that got bigger. But then we heard and saw the second plane, and we thought at that point that it wasn't an accident no more. That was intentionally.
What were the, maybe you were only with your fellow officers at that moment, but what was kind of the discussion going on at that point whenever you realized that this was most likely an attack?
Well, I guess the first gut feeling, which actually was a sick feeling, was that second plane went in to the tower. And the second sick feeling and scary feeling was when the tower came down. When that first tower came down, I knew that was a game changer with the whole scenario of what's going on. We weren't expecting, I don't think anyone was expecting that tower to come down, and especially the first one, especially the second one, and especially the fire department, who had their command center set up in Tower 1 also. I think that's why we lost the majority of our first responders, was because of that tower coming down, and it was unexpected.
So when the towers came down, what were your summons as an NYPD officer at that time? What was your strategy to help?
Well, we were first assigned to remove any rescue first responders that were actually there and seriously injured. Our boat was our boat assigned to. There was a triage set up in Jersey City, and we were transporting firemen and police officers that were seriously injured at that time, and any kind of medics also.
So when the towers went down,
That was right after the towers came down, yes.
and you guys went into.
So we had, with our boat, what we did was we bowed up with, we pulled up right close to the bulkhead of that's part of Battery Park City right there. It's a residential area of downtown. It's the closest access to the water and to Ground Zero. So they set up an area where we would come in and out to start taking first responders seriously injured over to Jersey City.
So that they could get the help they need.
Yes.
So is that what you did? Is that once y'all started loading, did you make multiple trips back and forth?
Yes, we had all of our emergency, or all the police boats were assigned to take over first responders, the seriously injured over there. When we were pulling up, we had civilians throwing their children at us to get them off the island and keep them out of harm's way. Soon after that, then they had we had ferry boats, small ferry boats coming in to help out with all civilians, and also tugboats and also private chartered fishing boats. It was one of the largest evacuations by water in history. Over 500,000 people were removed from the island of Manhattan in 9 hours, not just from emergency response vessels, but also from private charters, tugboats. It's something that's actually on YouTube that you can actually see. It's called 9/11 Boat Lift. It's really a great segment. It shows, I learned a lot about it too, because being there, I didn't see the real big picture until actually this came out, and it was really incredible how everyone came together and helping out, trying to evacuate as many people as we can by boats. Because all the bridges, you can walk over the bridges, all the tunnels were closed. So people were you couldn't go downtown because you were downtown already. So you had to go north, go uptown or midtown to try to get, any kind of public transportation, which the ferries weren't working, the buses weren't working, no taxis were around there. So it was kind of a situation where you had to fend for yourself.
You just said that a lot of people that were on these boats, part of the 500K that were evacuated off of Manhattan, obviously a lot of those people weren't involved in the actual scenario that was taking place at World Trade Center. But the guys that were, the first responders that were, the ones that you were taking to Jersey City as part of the triage, as part of figuring out how you can help them, what were you seeing on those men and women? What were they saying? Just any things that you were feeling when you were helping them out?
Well, unfortunately, I won't go into detail. In confidence, I can say that most of those people we had on the boats, especially for the first hour or so, probably deceased. They were very, very serious. There was no other medical assistance available at all. So I'm sure that they've perished. But the biggest thing too is that a lot of the diseases, cancers, contribute to ground zero, and we're still losing men and women, not only first responders, which is horrible, but also civilians, which is horrible too, to this day.
And that is just for the uninitiated, like myself, who might not know. Are you speaking specifically of things that were ingested on that day?
Correct. When we got off right after the towers came down, it was almost like walking next to a volcano ash, that had erupted, and 5 to 6 inches of just dust, and you're trailing that in and out every day. We kind of knew that there was something not right. They gave us paper masks for about 2 weeks until they got canisters, which is the breathing mask with the special filtration. And then soon after that, they realized that they were giving us the wrong canisters. They weren't filtered enough to take out the particles that were affecting our lungs. So they gave us new ones after that, but that's already about 6 to 7 weeks prior into being out there every day, doing the bucket brigade and dealing with the everyday soot and your clothes and your shoes. And we were constantly changing clothes. We had several different sports outfits out there, companies that actually donated socks, donated undergarment, shirts, hats. And every day you would throw them out. There was a decontamination area set up where you would, after you leave ground zero, they had it all cordoned off, was all secured, and you have to go through a cleaning debris area first, where you would basically, throw out all your garment. You would have a coveralls over that. You get rid of that, but basically you're still your boots and your shoes and your socks, and it was still exposed. And that only happened probably about a week into the rescue effort, the recovery effort from ground zero. So that first week or so, basically, all your uniforms or your clothing had to be discarded. I didn't even want to bring them home to get cleaned.
You just spoke to the medical effects of that on the human body and how people are still dealing with it, and you spoke to the soot and the breathing issues.
Right.
Can you also talk a bit about the visual, as far as how hard it made it to see? What was it? What were things on day of, and then the weeks afterwards?
Sure. So for several weeks after the initial attack, it was a very secured and tedious job of removal of the debris on ground zero. And this was done with buckets, and Lowe's buckets and Home Depot buckets and whatever buckets there were available. Probably over 500 to 700 men and women, first responders, would line up, and we would just take out small debris at a time. The reason for that is that we had no major machinery in there at the time because of any kind of survivors that might be able to bring out of there. So we didn't want to jeopardize crushing them or any kind of further damage while they're still alive. So it was a very tedious operation. So you have with that's in the air constantly, and for about 3 or 4 days after the initial attack, there were buildings that came down periodically. So out of that whole the first 3 or 4 days, there was seven of the World Trade Centers that came down. The smaller ones, not the two, besides the two larger ones, the Twin Towers. There's also Tower 3, Tower 4, Tower 5, Tower 6, and Tower 7. So there's 7 towers part of that World Trade Center, and each of those eventually did come down. And they would blow a whistle, and everybody had to evacuate the area if they suspected that another tower was coming down, which after about 3 or 4 whistles, eventually the tower would come down. That went on for about a week, and then there was a lot of damage that other buildings around it that eventually had to be taken down. And so there's always, for months, there was always smoldering of the smoke, so it was always something in the air. You're always breathing, and it traveled. I mean, it traveled all the way through to Staten Island, which is about 30 miles away. It traveled into the other boroughs, which is Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and all up in Manhattan too, and over to New Jersey. Jersey's, only a river apart with the Hudson River, so there's a lot of surrounding areas that got affected from it too.
The preceding weeks, what were your assignments as an NYPD officer? I mean, you talked about just now about that first week, the first 3 or 4
Right.
days. What did the first month, 2 months look like after that? For
Well, initially after we did the removal of our first responders and the civilians, within the next day we were assigned to my particular unit, which is about 2 boats at the time. We have a 30-boat fleet. Well, we were assigned, 2 of our boats were assigned, and we have 55-foot custom boats that hold about 40 to 50 passengers. But so we were assigned to the mercantile exchange, which is the commodities, because they were really concerned. Not only did the terrorists want to hurt us physically, but they also want to hurt us financially. And at the time, President Bush wanted to make sure that the market didn't get hurt as bad, because every minute, you're talking to millions and millions of dollars, every minute the market is down. So one of his priorities, once things were secured, is to set up shop again with the mercantile exchange, which is the commodities. So within 24 to 48 hours, they were trading again. And that's a big role. A lot of people don't understand that unless you're in that kind of field. But that's really important for the economy of the United States at the time. So we were assigned to them. We had executives coming in with their computers and their towers and just coming on a boat. I mean, millions and millions of dollars worth of information, and they were coming on a boat. They set up shop in New Jersey across the river, and within 24 to 48 hours, they opened and running again, which is a very big thing, accomplishment for them. And we helped try to do that for them too. But and then we had the biggest saddest thing that probably took place post the attack. There were a lot of civilians. We had 3,000, people who perished that day. We had families and loved ones coming to visit the site. There was a big granite wall, probably about 300 feet by maybe 6 feet tall. It just was part of the marina there and the park. And every day there would be new visitors of loved ones who would bring their pictures of them on there, of the loved ones who they felt are missing at the time from Ground Zero. And we would get off the boat, and every day we would see more and more of these pictures on there. And then sometimes they would put they had the picture of the person they're missing, the loved one, plus any kids they had, they would have the pictures of the kids there too. So it got to a point where probably after like about 5 or 6 days, the wall was full. But it gave us encouragement. It was sad, but it gave us encouragement to go in there when you're tired, when you're hot, when you're kind of mad. It was we were very angry. A lot of us were very angry that this happened. We couldn't do anything for it. We had a crime scene of over 7 acres that we couldn't do anything about until our military did what they had to do. And I try to remind them of that, because it's so important, what they did.
Speak to the camaraderie, if you don't mind, of you and your brothers and sisters with not only NYPD, but the larger scope of the city of New York, the area of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Everybody coming together that is in law enforcement or emergency services.
Mm-hmm. It was incredible is that a lot of the country, sees New York. We're indestructible. We go out there, we pull our shirt inside. There's a big S. We're Supermen and Superwomen. That day we weren't. But after that, a lot of we had within a few days, and we have a lot of resources to our exposure, are available to us. We are available to always go and help other counties, other states that need us. We have the manpower, we have the resources, we have the equipment. But we had a lot of men and women from all over our country helping us. I would be next to someone, with a different kind of badge, from a different state, from a different county, no matter whatever. And these are small towns that when their people are missing, they're missed. They feel it, but they felt that it was really important to help us, give us support. And that's something that, we'll never forget,
How does that make you feel, not only as a New Yorker, but as an American?
Oh, great. I mean, it really brought everyone together that day. Not that day, but several days and several months after that. It didn't matter, what nationality you were. It didn't matter what, if you're any Democrat, Republican, or whatever. It didn't matter. Everyone worked together and for the same cause. And the same thing went in Pennsylvania for the attack over there. and at the Pentagon and the attack over there. Everyone came together and worked together, and it was a really great feeling, you know. And I know myself, and I know all of our men and women in first responders are very grateful for all that, you know.
Were you born and raised in New York?
I was, yes.
Tell me what being a New Yorker means to you.
I loved growing up in New York. My parents were born in Manhattan. I have great memories. I still have family there too. And I moved down to Panama City 17 years ago. I retired in 2006, moved here in 2007, raised my 3 boys. They all went to school here. They went to Mosley and Holy Nativity, and 2 of my boys went to FSU. My youngest boy just graduated. So we have, and I'm so glad. We were vacationing here for a long time prior to us moving down here, and I always said, God willing, that we will move down here when I retire. We have. The people here in Bay County are incredible. I have some really good friends here, and Bay County doesn't forget. You know, I was able to have the privilege to talk to the stair climbers the other day. And gave them a little insight, a little story of what I went through and what's happened that day, and why the stair climbing is so significant. But I think it's, you know, Bay County, besides the memorials they have here, they teach it in the classes. That's Florida too. I mean, we have a great governor. We have great, you know, senators and local officials that look out for our county here, and they don't forget what happened that day.
And to speak to that, Bay County is a place that is steep and rich with military history, past and present.
Mm-hmm.
You see between Navy bases here, the Air
Right.
Force base here, but it also has a big time respect and appreciation in my eyes for law enforcement officials as well. Can you tell me about the reception that you get from people anytime either they find out about your story or you share it with them?
There, you know, we do live in a great area and county that respects and honors the military and the first responders, and we're fortunate for that, because there's a lot of towns in the country that don't give the support and the respect they do. There's not a day that probably goes by that someone doesn't say something to me in regards to their appreciation for me and for what I did, and I mean, I appreciate that, but also they say the same thing with the military too. We have great, you know, between the Navy base here and Tyndall base, it's a great military community. Everybody in the community supports. I'm proud to belong to a community that does that shows their appreciation, not only for their law enforcement, but also for the military. We have a great sheriff. I mean, Tommy Ford, along with the other chiefs of Panama City Beach and Panama City, is good leadership, and their leadership and the way they conduct their men and women is how to perceive the way the public respects them, and that all comes in great leadership. And we have great leadership. We're very fortunate. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good leadership throughout our country when it comes to law enforcement. But Bay County has some great leaders in law enforcement here, and I think they're well respected in that respect.
Today is the 23rd anniversary. I've never been through anything like what you've been through, but I would be willing to bet that this isn't just something you think about once a year. This is something you remember quite often. Can you tell me a little bit, though, about these anniversaries? How do you view it whenever you look back on your experience?
So there's probably not a day I go by without thinking somewhat of it. Unfortunately, it seems like more often than not, I get reminded every time a friend or a coworker perishes because of the result of Ground Zero. like I said, there's 75 different forms of cancer now that is related to Ground Zero. Unfortunately, my sister-in-law passed away a year ago last June from cancer related to Ground Zero. She was out as a civilian. She worked for Merrill Lynch, and it was Tower 7. But it took 22 years later for it to actually come out in her body with this cancer. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed back in January of 23, and she passed in June of 23. So it's tougher. It's tougher for the families who've lost, who were losing members, loved ones, and each year too. There's more deaths related due to illnesses from Ground Zero than all the deaths of the law enforcement of NYPD since day one, unfortunately. So it's where the Congress has helped us as far as extending health care for us. We get screened once a year to just make sure we have no major illnesses. But it's still something always in the back of your mind. I know of all my workers, I just lost another friend who was a fireman. He was actually retired during the attack. He retired a year prior. He came in voluntarily and just donated his services, and he just passed about 9 months ago with illnesses related to Ground Zero. And there's so many more you hear each week, which is unfortunate. And that's where it just brings up different reflection on what happened that day, and that's something that we're unexpected and something that always stay with us.
Obviously, a lot of what we talked about today is experience of in general Ground Zero, the day of. Have you gone back?
So I have gone back. The first time I've gone back since after I moved down to Panama City in 2007 was actually a trip that my son, at the time my youngest boy, he was going to Holy Nativity. We did a class trip. They went to D.C. and then we went up to New York. I've been up, I see it in a different light. I have not been into the museum. A lot of stuff in the museum we recovered. I know what's there. It's done and everything's done in very good taste. And I feel it's a great memorial. I'm glad. One of the things that I always said, it's crazy, is that the first one of the towers, when the towers came down, everyone was very, very mad, very angry. I remember good memories of those towers with my dad and stuff, and when I was growing up. But one of the things that I always said, I said we can't just make it a burial site. We just can't make it a memorial and that's it. We got to build a bigger and better building. And fortunately, that's what the developers, Daniel Levinskin was one of the developers there, and he designed, and he actually, they did that. The 1776, which is notorious, and I'm so glad they did that. But when I go there, I see it in a different setting, but I think that it's very done in, like I said, done in very good taste. I think that it's something that is a good thing to visit when you're in New York, and I'm sure that I know New Yorkers will never forget, but I know people around the world not forgetting either.
Part of not forgetting a person, an event, a place is the legacy that is left behind from that person, that place, that event. What do you hope is the standing legacy of NYPD officers and other first responders that responded for our nation on that day?
That at the end of the day, we work together. Um, it's all we all need to join together and help each other. And that was a phenomenal expression of love and caring for your fellow worker, for your fellow citizen. And it's unfortunate, but we've got away for that. We forgot about that. And I just wish that more of us would remember the camaraderie, the love, the respect we had for each other back then.
How do you think that each American that is watching this tonight on the couch, or the millions and millions and millions that aren't watching this tonight on the couch, if you could speak to them, how would you ask them to go about finding that camaraderie and that friendliness and that compassion for one another again?
Well, one thing is I had going into there, I was afraid, and I think anybody who was there, who was, even if you are not there exactly during the attacks, but it was uncertainty. It was a thing that we never experienced before, and I prayed to God that, you know, if you want me out of here, take me out of here. And actually, He did. We got pulled away that morning, and I don't know why. It said that we had to go back and pick up some military guys. It was a Navy base in Staten Island, but we were supposed to go and pick them up at our base, which we never get it's a VIP tour, which they take them around the harbor and show them around the harbor. We got pulled away that morning. We never got into our base. Nothing was on the roll call. No contact information, anything about any kind of visitors coming on our boat. But that, I believe, was the hand of God, because we probably would have been the first 10 responders in one of those towers that morning. But God had a different plan. So what I can say is that trust in God, and that's what I did that day. I know my co-workers did too. Never leave home without saying goodbye and hugging your kids and your spouse. You never know what's going to happen that day.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else that I haven't asked about that experience, about that day, or just the anniversary of the event that you would like to say?
No, I think you touched on everything. I think we did. But I thank you, and I appreciate men and women like yourself too that don't forget, and I appreciate that. I know a lot, not only myself, but I know that all the men and women in uniform do also. Thank you.